An old shoebox forgotten beneath dusty Christmas decorations. A handwritten letter that would redefine everything historians thought they knew about the Revolutionary War. One elementary school teacher's simple attic cleaning project that would summon a White House delegation to her modest Philadelphia row house within hours. This is the extraordinary true story of how Sarah Chen's weekend task of organizing holiday ornaments uncovered correspondence that would shatter established history, threatening academic careers and forcing a reckoning with a 200-year-old lie that shaped America's foundation narrative. Before we explore this remarkable journey, tell us where you're watching from. And if this discovery moves you, be sure to subscribe, because tomorrow we're sharing another incredible story that will challenge everything you believed about our nation's beginnings. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The brass alarm clock on Sarah Chen's nightstand read 5:47 a.m., though she'd been lying awake since before dawn, staring at the water stain spreading across her bedroom ceiling. At 43, the third-grade teacher's weathered hands showed the evidence of 20 years spent guiding young minds, her small fingers permanently tinged with marker stains and chalk dust. The narrow row house in Philadelphia's Fishtown neighborhood had been in her late husband David's family for generations, its creaking floors and peeling wallpaper telling stories of countless working-class families who'd called it home. But now, those same walls seemed to close in on her with mounting pressures she couldn't escape. The kitchen table downstairs was covered with unopened envelopes, each bearing the red stamps of urgency that had become all too familiar. Foreclosure notices from City National Bank gave her 30 days to produce the $23,000 in back payments. On the mortgage David had refinanced shortly before his unexpected death from a heart attack 18 months ago. The teaching job that had once seemed secure now barely covered basic expenses, let alone the doubled mortgage payments that had resulted from her husband's well-intentioned but misguided attempt to fund his plumbing business expansion. Sarah pulled on her favorite purple robe, a Christmas gift from David 3 years ago, its fabric now thin but still warm with memories. The morning light filtering through the gauze curtains revealed dust motes dancing in the air, reminders of all the cleaning she'd been putting off. Since David's death, the house had accumulated a layer of gentle neglect, not from carelessness, but from the simple exhaustion of grieving while working 14-hour days to make ends meet. As she prepared her usual breakfast of instant oatmeal and black coffee, Sarah's gaze drifted to the photos covering the refrigerator door. David smiling in his work uniform, her students' hand-drawn cards from Teacher Appreciation Day, their wedding photo from 15 years ago when they'd been so young and optimistic about their future together. Now, at 43, she faced the real possibility of losing the only home she'd ever known as an adult, the place where she'd built every significant memory of her married life. The irony wasn't lost on her that she, a teacher who helped children learn about American history every day, might lose her home just blocks from Independence Hall, where that history was born. Her lesson plans about the Revolutionary War and the Founding Fathers had always felt like ancient stories, removed from the struggles of ordinary people like herself. But this morning, with foreclosure papers competing for space with unpaid utility bills, the gap between historical heroes and regular folks working to keep their homes felt narrower than ever. Outside, the early summer heat was already building, promising another scorching Philadelphia day. The narrow streets of Fishtown showed the neighborhood's ongoing gentrification, converted warehouses standing alongside century-old row houses, young professionals jogging past elderly, long-time residents sitting on their stoops. Sarah had watched the changes with mixed feelings. New investment brought better schools and safer streets, but it also meant rising property taxes that pushed families like hers to the financial brink. She sipped her coffee, and tried to focus on the day ahead. Summer school started in a week, which meant extra income, but also meant spending her brief respite, preparing lessons and cleaning the house she'd been neglecting. The attic, in particular, had become a repository for Christmas decorations, old files, and boxes of David's belongings. She hadn't been ready to sort through. Maybe today would be the day to finally tackle that overwhelming space. The thought of facing David's possessions still brought a tightness to her chest, but Sarah knew it had to be done. The house needed to be organized, whether for continued living or eventual sale. She'd learned from experience that keeping busy helped more than dwelling on loss, and there was always satisfaction in creating order from chaos. A skill she'd honed through years of managing active classrooms filled with 8-year-olds. After finishing her modest breakfast, Sarah dressed in her oldest jeans and a faded Temple University t-shirt, pulling her long black hair into a ponytail. The house held that particular stillness of early morning when the traffic outside was minimal and her neighbors hadn't yet begun their daily routines. In these quiet moments, she sometimes felt David's presence most strongly, as if he might walk downstairs at any moment, asking about coffee. The narrow staircase to the second floor creaked familiarly under her feet, each step a choreographed dance she'd performed thousands of times. The attic access was in the hallway outside, what had been their bedroom, now just her bedroom, a simple square panel that opened onto a ladder leading to the cramped space above. Sarah retrieved her step stool from the hall closet, positioned it carefully, and pushed the panel aside. Hot air rushed down as the attic opening revealed itself, carrying the scent of stored belongings and summer heat. Sarah climbed the ladder and hit the light switch, illuminating the slanted space filled with boxes, old furniture covered in sheets, and the artificial Christmas tree they'd bought during their first year of marriage. The area wasn't quite tall, enough for her to stand upright in most places, creating an intimate, cave-like feeling that had always made the attic seem separate from the rest of the house. She'd planned to start with the Christmas decorations, which seemed less emotionally charged than other stored items. As Sarah moved boxes of ornaments and lights, she discovered how haphazardly everything had been stored over the years. Boxes, marked kitchen stuff, sat next to containers labeled summer clothes, while unmarked cardboard boxes suggested impulse storage decisions made during hectic moments. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Behind a stack of holiday boxes, Sarah found an old wooden chest she didn't recognize. Its dark wood showed scratches and wear, but the joinery and brass corners indicated quality craftsmanship from an earlier era. She didn't remember David mentioning this particular piece, and it wasn't something she'd noticed during their initial exploration of the house when they'd moved in. Perhaps it had been hidden behind other stored items all these years. The chest wasn't locked, though it required some effort to lift the heavy lid. Inside, Sarah discovered a collection of seemingly random items. Old leather bootlaces, tarnished. Brass buttons, a few pieces of what looked like hand-forged metal implements, and several books whose leather bindings had darkened with age. But what caught her immediate attention was a small wooden box nestled among the other items. Its smooth finish contrasted with the rougher surfaces around it. Opening the wooden box revealed a carefully preserved collection of papers tied with a faded ribbon. The top document immediately captured Sarah's attention, a letter written in elegant cursive handwriting on paper that had yellowed with age but remained remarkably well preserved. The letterhead bore symbols she didn't recognize, and the date, at the top, made her heart skip. January 15th, 1777. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she lifted the letter. Her undergraduate degree in history, earned during evening classes while teaching, had given her enough knowledge to recognize genuinely old documents. The paper felt different from modern materials. thicker, with a texture that suggested hand manufacturing rather than mechanical production. The ink had faded to a brown color that spoke of genuine age, not artificial distressing. The elegant handwriting demanded careful reading, its formal language and old-fashioned spelling requiring patience to decipher. But as Sarah worked through the text, her excitement grew. The letter appeared to be from someone identified only as AM, to my dear friend in the cause, discussing plans for what seemed to be Revolutionary War activities around Philadelphia. References to troop movements and our allies across the sea suggested military significance, while mentions of securing future cooperation and arrangements for continued correspondence indicated ongoing strategic planning. What made Sarah's pulse quicken was the casual mention of names she recognized from her teaching materials. There was a reference to speaking with General W about alternative strategies, and a curious note about young H's financial innovations proving invaluable. The letter's tone suggested insider knowledge of events and personalities that shaped the Revolutionary War, written by someone clearly involved in significant decision-making. But the most striking aspect was what the letter revealed about timing. Sarah had taught countless lessons about the harsh winter at Valley Forge, which began in December 1777. Yet this letter, dated almost a year earlier, discussed detailed preparations for that infamous winter, suggesting foreknowledge and planning that contradicted the accepted historical narrative of an army caught unprepared by circumstances. Sarah carefully read through the other documents in the box. They appeared to be correspondence from multiple writers, all dated between 1776 and 1778, all discussing aspects of Revolutionary War strategy with an intimacy and detail that seemed extraordinary. One letter mentioned specific British troop positions weeks before historically recorded battles. Another discussed maintaining relationships with our European benefactors in ways that suggested more formal diplomatic arrangements than generally taught in schools. The implications began to dawn on Sarah. If these letters were authentic, they suggested a level of organization, planning, and international cooperation among revolutionary forces that differed significantly from standard historical accounts. Rather than the somewhat improvised rebellion often portrayed in textbooks, these documents painted a picture of sophisticated strategic planning involving careful coordination with foreign allies. Sarah's background teaching elementary school meant she wasn't equipped to fully analyze the historical significance of what she'd found, but her instinct told her these documents were potentially important. The paper, ink, writing style, and historical references all seemed consistent with genuine 18th century materials. More intriguingly, the documents had been carefully preserved in conditions that suggested someone had always understood their value. As she photographed each document with her phone, Sarah noticed details she'd initially missed. Several letters bore what appeared to be wax seals, though most were broken or partial. The ribbons binding the collection showed careful preservation over time. Most significantly, the wooden box had a small brass plaque inside that read, "Property of the Hartwell family, preserve for posterity." The Hartwell name sparked a memory. During their first week in the house, the elderly neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, had mentioned that David's family had purchased the property from the Hartwells, one of Philadelphia's oldest families. She'd said something about the Hartwells having owned the house since colonial times before selling it in the 1950s, when the last family member moved to assisted living. Sarah realized she'd been in the attic for hours. The summer heat had intensified, making the cramped space uncomfortably warm, but she'd been too absorbed in the documents to notice. Her phone showed dozens of photographs of the letters and other papers. She carefully returned everything to the wooden box, then secured the box itself in her bedroom where it would be safe from temperature fluctuations and potential moisture. Downstairs, Sarah made fresh coffee and sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through the photos on her phone. Each letter contained details that seemed historically significant, but she lacked the expertise to fully understand their implications. What she did know was that authentic Revolutionary War documents, if that's what these were, could be extremely valuable both historically and monetarily. The teacher in her immediately thought about verification. In her classroom, she always emphasized the importance of checking sources and consulting experts. If these documents were genuine, historians would want to examine them. If they were forgeries, it would be important to establish that fact. Sarah had heard stories of family attics yielding unexpected treasures, but she'd never imagined such a discovery in her own home. She thought about calling her former history professor from Temple University, Dr. Michael Brennan, who specialized in colonial American history. Professor Brennan had always encouraged his students to pursue their curiosity, and he'd been particularly impressed with Sarah's research on working-class involvement in the Revolutionary War. He'd even written a letter of recommendation when she'd applied for her current teaching position, but making that call felt like a big step. Once experts became involved, Sarah suspected her quiet discovery would quickly become something larger and more complicated. She thought about David, who had always encouraged her to follow her instincts, even when they led to uncertain territory. He'd supported her decision to pursue evening classes while teaching full-time, believing that knowledge was always worth the effort. The afternoon sun streamed through her kitchen window, casting long shadows across the table where the foreclosure notices lay. Sarah realized that her discovery, whatever its ultimate significance, had given her the first sense of excitement she'd felt in months. The mysterious letters connected her directly to the history she taught, making the past feel immediate and personal in a way she'd never experienced. As she prepared a simple lunch, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. If the documents proved historically significant, they might offer a way to save her house. More importantly, they might contribute to a more complete understanding of the Revolutionary War. Her students had always been fascinated by stories of ordinary people making extraordinary contributions to history. Perhaps these letters contained exactly such stories. The decision to contact Professor Brennan gradually solidified in her mind. Sarah understood that authenticating historical documents required expertise far beyond her own. And regardless of the document's monetary value, their historical significance demanded professional evaluation. She owed it to the careful preservation efforts of the Hartwell family and to the historical record itself to ensure these letters received proper scholarly attention. After lunch, Sarah called the university and learned that Professor Brennan was conducting summer research. She left a detailed voicemail explaining her discovery and indicating that she'd like his advice on next steps. As she hung up, Sarah felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. She'd set something in motion that she couldn't control, but her instincts told her it was the right choice. The afternoon passed slowly as Sarah continued organizing the attic, though her thoughts kept returning to the wooden box, now secured in her bedroom. She found herself listening for the phone, hoping Professor Brennan would return her call quickly. The letters felt like a secret that grew heavier with each hour, demanding resolution and understanding. As evening approached, Sarah prepared a simple dinner and tried to focus on normal activities. But the ordinary routine of cooking, eating, and cleaning up felt surreal after the morning's discovery. She kept glancing toward the stairs, knowing that something potentially extraordinary waited in her bedroom, hidden in a box that had been overlooked for who knew how many years. The summer evening was warm enough to sit on her front steps, a habit she'd developed since David's death, when the house felt too quiet. Her neighbors were scattered along the street, some watering small gardens, others walking dogs or chatting across fence lines. The scene embodied the comfortable rhythms of working-class Philadelphia life, unchanged despite the neighborhood's ongoing evolution. Mrs. Kowalski approached with her ancient dachshund, Murphy, pausing to chat, as she often did. In her 80s, the elderly Polish woman had lived in Fishtown her entire life and remembered the neighborhood's history with remarkable detail. Tonight, Sarah found herself listening with new interest as Mrs. Kowalski discussed the area's past. The Hartwells were good families, Mrs. Kowalski said, her accent still noticeable despite 8 decades in America. Very proud of their connection to old Philadelphia. The last one, Miss Eleanor Hartwell, she was teacher like you. Always talked about the family papers, said they went back to colonial times. Shame when she sold the house to move to that place in New Jersey. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Did Miss Hartwell ever mention Revolutionary War papers, specifically? Mrs. Kowalski's eyes sharpened with interest. Why, yes. She was always proud that some ancestor had been involved with the Continental Army. Said the family had letters from George Washington's time, but I thought it was just old lady pride, you know, making family history bigger than it was. The conversation confirmed Sarah's growing suspicion that she'd found the papers Miss Hartwell had been proud of, documents that had somehow been left behind when the property changed hands. The thought that these potentially valuable historical materials had been forgotten in the attic for 70 years seemed both tragic and miraculous. As darkness fell, Sarah returned inside, her mind buzzing with new questions. Tomorrow, she hoped, Professor Brennan would call back and help her understand exactly what she'd discovered. Until then, she would protect the letters and continue documenting everything she'd found. The elementary school teacher who'd started the day, worried about losing her house, now possessed something that might connect her directly to the founding of the nation she'd spent her career teaching about. The irony wasn't lost on her that, in seeking to organize her own life, she'd potentially uncovered a piece of American history that had been waiting patiently in her attic all along. Professor Michael Brennan returned Sarah's call at 6:43 a.m. the next morning, his voice carrying the excitement of someone who'd been awake since 4, thinking about historical possibilities. Sarah, I've been turning your message over in my mind all night. Colonial-era documents found in a Philadelphia attic. This is exactly the kind of discovery that can reshape our understanding of the Revolution. I'm canceling my morning seminars. Can I come over today? Sarah felt a surge of validation, mixed with nervous energy. Professor Brennan's enthusiasm confirmed her instincts about the document's significance. Of course, I've photographed everything, but I haven't moved the originals since yesterday. I want to make sure they're handled properly. Excellent thinking. I'm bringing Dr. Elena Vasquez from our authentication lab and possibly James Wright, our colonial America specialist. If these letters are what you've described, we'll want expertise in paper analysis, ink dating, and historical context, all working together. After hanging up, Sarah realized she had only 3 hours to prepare for what might become the most significant day of her life. She showered, dressed carefully in clothes that felt professional but approachable, and spent extra time organizing the attic space where the discovery had been made. Something told her these experts would want to see exactly where and how the documents had been found. The breakfast she'd planned became impossible as butterflies filled her stomach. Instead, Sarah made strong coffee and reviewed her photographs, again trying to memorize details she might need to discuss. The letters felt even more mysterious now, their elegant cursive script holding secrets that had waited centuries for the right moment to emerge. At 9:30, a modest sedan pulled up outside her rowhouse. Sarah watched from the window as 3 individuals emerged, all carrying professional-looking cases and equipment. Professor Brennan, now in his 60s with silver hair and the confident, a posture of someone comfortable in his expertise, led the group. Behind him came a younger woman with sharp, observant eyes and a precise manner that suggested scientific training, followed by a tall man whose casual academic attire couldn't hide his focused intensity. Sarah greeted them at the door, grateful that her teacher training had made her comfortable with managing groups of people. Professor Brennan made quick introductions. Dr. Elena Vasquez specialized in historical document authentication using cutting-edge scientific methods, while Dr. James Wright focused on Revolutionary War political and social networks, particularly the informal alliances that shaped the conflict. Before we examine the documents, Professor Brennan explained, we'd like to understand the context of your discovery. Sometimes the location and circumstances tell us as much as the papers themselves. Sarah led them upstairs, describing her attic organization project and the forgotten chest hidden behind Christmas decorations. In the attic, the experts examined the wooden chest with the kind of careful attention she'd learned to appreciate in her students when they were truly engaged. Dr. Vasquez photographed the chest from multiple angles before opening it. The construction suggests late 18th century craftsmanship. See these dovetail joints and the brass work. This level of skill indicates commissioning by someone with resources. She lifted out the wooden box containing the letters. The interior box shows even finer work. Someone invested significant effort in preserving these documents. In Sarah's bedroom, the experts arranged their equipment while she retrieved the letters. The transformation was remarkable. Her personal space momentarily became a professional laboratory. Dr. Vasquez set up a portable microscope and specialized lighting, while Dr. Wright prepared notebooks and reference materials. The moment Professor Brennan examined the first letter, his expression changed dramatically. Sarah, this is extraordinary. The paper, ink, handwriting style, everything appears consistent with 1777, but more importantly, the content. He read silently for several minutes before looking up with barely contained excitement. These letters discuss Revolutionary War strategy with an intimacy that suggests access to the highest levels of command. Dr. Wright leaned over to read, his eyes widening as he scanned the elegant script. Look at this reference to General W. and the discussion of Valley Forge preparations. If this is authentic, it suggests Washington's forces had much more advanced planning than we've believed. Dr. Vasquez began her technical analysis using magnification to examine paper fibers and ink composition. The paper shows characteristics consistent with 18th century American manufacture. The watermarks, when visible, match known colonial producers. We'll need laboratory analysis for definitive dating, but visually, everything supports authenticity. As the experts worked, Sarah found herself becoming emotional. These strangers had validated her instincts, confirming that her discovery was historically significant. More than that, their excitement made her realize she'd connected with something larger than herself, a piece of the past that had waited in her attic for the right moment to contribute to historical understanding. Sarah, Professor Brennan said, looking up from careful examination of multiple letters, you've stumbled onto something that could rewrite textbooks. These aren't just any Revolutionary War documents. They appear to contain strategic discussions from key figures, revealing planning and cooperation that standard histories have missed. Dr. Wright was photographing one letter with particular intensity. This reference to our French connections predates the formal alliance by several months, and the discussion of coordination with Northern forces suggests Benedict Arnold was involved in strategic planning much earlier than previously documented. The implications began overwhelming Sarah. You're saying these letters could change how we understand the Revolutionary War? Potentially, yes, Dr. Vasquez confirmed, but authentic or not, documents this significant need careful handling. We should follow established protocols for major historical discoveries. Professor Brennan nodded thoughtfully. Sarah, with your permission, I'd like to contact colleagues at the National Archives and the Museum of the American Revolution. These institutions have resources for proper preservation and authentication that exceed what university labs can provide. Sarah felt a moment of uncertainty. What does that mean for me, for my ownership of the letters? That's an excellent question, Dr. Wright acknowledged. Historically significant documents found on private property present complex legal questions. You have rights as the discoverer, but institutions will want to ensure proper preservation and public access. The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's phone ringing. She didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway, curious about who might be calling during such an important moment. Ms. Chen, this is Rebecca Martinez from the White House Historical Association. We've received information about a potentially significant Revolutionary War discovery at your residence. Could you confirm whether you've found documents mentioning early American political figures? Sarah felt the room spinning. I'm sorry, who is this? How did you... I only discovered these letters yesterday. Ms. Chen, certain discoveries trigger automatic notification systems within the historical community. When documents potentially relevant to founding-era history are found, various organizations monitor for such developments. We'd very much like to arrange a visit to examine these materials. Professor Brennan gestured for the phone. Ms. Martinez, this is Professor Michael Brennan from Temple University. We're currently conducting initial authentication. While I appreciate your organization's interest, we want to ensure proper academic protocols are followed. Sarah couldn't hear the White House representative's response, but Professor Brennan's expression suggested the conversation was more complex than expected. After several minutes of tense discussion, he hung up and turned to address the room. This is moving faster than I anticipated. The White House Historical Association doesn't typically respond to private discoveries within 24 hours unless something extraordinary has triggered their attention. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her microscopic analysis. There's another possibility. Someone else may have known about these documents. The preservation quality suggests careful maintenance over time. Perhaps the Hartwell family had discussed these papers with historical societies before leaving them behind. Sarah remembered her conversation with Mrs. Kowalski about Miss Eleanor Hartwell's pride in family papers. My neighbor mentioned that the previous owner, Miss Hartwell, had talked about family documents going back to colonial times, but she moved out in the 1950s. Dr. Wright made a quick note. Historical societies keep records of potential discoveries. If Miss Hartwell had consulted with experts about family documents, those consultations would be documented. Someone might have been waiting for these letters to surface. The peaceful morning had transformed into something resembling a historical emergency. Sarah watched these experts discuss her discovery with growing urgency, realizing her simple attic cleaning project had connected her to networks of historical preservation she'd never imagined existed. What should I do? Sarah asked, feeling overwhelmed by the rapid developments. Professor Brennan considered carefully. My recommendation is to proceed cautiously but cooperatively. These documents clearly have national historical significance. The White House Historical Association involvement, while unexpected, isn't necessarily problematic. They have remarkable preservation facilities and authentication resources. Dr. Vasquez added, from a conservation standpoint, these letters need appropriate environmental controls immediately. The attic storage, while preserving them this long, isn't suitable for long-term preservation. Temperature and humidity fluctuations could cause deterioration now that they're being handled. Sarah felt torn between excitement and protective instincts. These letters had been safely hidden in her attic for decades. Now, within hours of discovery, multiple organizations wanted access to them. She thought about David, who'd always encouraged her to trust experts while maintaining her own judgment. "I want to cooperate," Sarah said finally, "but I also want to understand my rights and responsibilities. These documents were in my attic, in my house. I should have some say in how they're handled." Dr. Wright nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the right attitude. Major historical discoveries require collaboration between finders, experts, and institutions. Your awareness of the legal and ethical complexities suggests you'll navigate this well." The phone rang again. This time Sarah recognized the number as Temple University's main line. Professor Brennan answered, identifying himself immediately. His side of the conversation consisted mainly of, "Yes, I understand, and we'll cooperate fully." When he hung up, his expression had grown more serious. That was the university's provost. "Apparently someone from the National Archives has contacted them about our discovery. They want to ensure proper academic documentation of our authentication process." Sarah felt events accelerating beyond her control. This is happening so fast. Yesterday I was worried about losing my house. Today I've got the White House and National Archives interested in letters I found in my attic. Dr. Vasquez smiled sympathetically. Historical discoveries rarely unfold according to normal timelines. But remember, you found something that could enhance our understanding of how America was founded. That's worth some temporary disruption. The experts continued working, but the atmosphere had shifted. What began as careful authentication had become something more urgent. Additional phone calls interrupted their work. A documentary producer who'd somehow heard about the discovery, a representative from a major auction house offering authentication services, and mysteriously someone claiming to represent interested parties in the private preservation community. By midday, Sarah's house had been transformed into an impromptu historical research center. The experts had documented every letter, photographed each page from multiple angles, and begun preliminary analysis of paper composition and ink chemistry. But the constant interruptions suggested word was spreading through networks she didn't understand. "Sarah," Professor Brennan said during a brief quiet moment, "I'm going to be direct. These letters appear to contain information that some people or institutions might have preferred remained hidden. The rapid response from various organizations suggests these documents touch on sensitive historical questions." Dr. Wright elaborated, "One letter mentions financial arrangements that differ from our standard understanding of Revolutionary War funding. Another discusses strategic decisions that could reflect poorly on certain historical figures if misinterpreted." Sarah felt a chill despite the warm day. "Are you saying these letters are dangerous?" "Not dangerous," Dr. Vasquez clarified, "but potentially controversial. Historical revision always creates tension between established narratives and new evidence. Some institutions invest heavily in particular interpretations of the past." The afternoon brought yet another unexpected visitor. A woman in her 50s, dressed professionally but approachably, appeared at Sarah's door without prior announcement. She introduced herself as Dr. Catherine Winters from the History Channel's Authentication Department, explaining that they'd received informal notifications about a significant Revolutionary War discovery. Professor Brennan exchanged glances with his colleagues. "Dr. Winters, while I appreciate your organization's interest, we're still conducting preliminary authentication. It's premature for media involvement." Dr. Winters smiled politely but persistently. "Professor Brennan, I understand your caution. However, the History Channel has resources that might assist your authentication process. We've worked with similar discoveries, and we understand the need for academic rigor alongside public interest. As the afternoon progressed, Sarah realized her discovery had established her as a reluctant central figure in competing interests. Academic institutions wanted to ensure proper scholarly analysis. Government organizations sought to control narratives about historical findings. Media companies desired dramatic stories that would capture public attention. Through it all, the letters themselves waited patiently in acid-free folders, their 18th century paper holding secrets that had somehow become controversial in the 21st century. Sarah found herself thinking about the people who'd written these letters more than 2 centuries ago, revolutionaries planning a new nation while managing complex relationships with foreign allies and domestic skeptics. Late in the day, Dr. Vasquez completed her initial analysis. Sarah, I can say with confidence that these letters are consistent with Revolutionary War-era materials. The paper analysis, ink composition and aging patterns all support authenticity, but laboratory dating will provide definitive confirmation. Professor Brennan synthesized the day's findings. From a content perspective, these letters reveal strategic thinking and international cooperation at levels not previously documented. They suggest revolutionary leaders were more organized and forward-thinking than traditional histories indicate. Dr. Wright added his expertise. The political implications are significant. These letters challenge several accepted narratives about Revolutionary War leadership, financial backing, and strategic planning. Academic review will need to be thorough. As the experts packed their equipment, Sarah felt exhausted but oddly energized. Her simple teacher's life had intersected with national history in ways she'd never imagined possible. The prospect of continued attention from multiple organizations was daunting, but the historical significance of her discovery was undeniable. Professor Brennan left last, offering final advice. Sarah, tomorrow's going to bring more attention, more phone calls, more people wanting access to these letters. My suggestion is to document everything, trust your instincts about people's motivations, and remember that you've made a genuine contribution to historical understanding. As evening fell, Sarah sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea, looking at the foreclosure notices that had seemed so important just days ago. The letters upstairs represented potential solutions to her financial problems, but more importantly, they connected her to something larger than personal struggles. She'd become a bridge between past and present, holding documents that might help 21st century Americans better understand their 18th century origins. The phone rang one more time as darkness settled over Fishtown. Sarah hesitated before answering, uncertain what new development awaited. But her life had changed irreversibly, and pretending otherwise wouldn't stop the momentum of discovery. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new people wanting access to the letters that had waited patiently in her attic. But tonight, Sarah Chen felt connected to the revolutionary spirit that had shaped her neighborhood, her city, and her nation more than 2 centuries ago. The call came from a number Sarah didn't recognize, but the voice was unmistakably authoritative. Ms. Chen, this is Dr. Margaret Sullivan, Chief Historian at the White House. I'm calling to inform you that we're assembling a team to visit Philadelphia tomorrow morning. We have compelling reasons to believe your discovery may impact our understanding of presidential history. Sarah glanced at the clock, 8:30 p.m. Dr. Sullivan, with all due respect, how did you learn about these letters so quickly? I only found them yesterday. Ms. Chen, significant historical discoveries trigger notification systems throughout the scholarly community. When documents, potentially involving George Washington's surface, multiple institutions coordinate responses. We're not here to take anything from you. We're here to ensure proper preservation and understanding. After hanging up, Sarah realized her quiet evening had ended. Tomorrow would bring the highest levels of historical authority to her modest Fishtown rowhouse. She spent the night reviewing her photographs of the letters, trying to understand what made them valuable enough to warrant a White House visit. By 7 a.m., news vans had appeared on her street. Sarah peeked through the curtains to see reporters setting up equipment, their early arrival suggesting someone had leaked information about the White House team's visit. Mrs. Kowalski waved from across the street, clearly enjoying the unexpected excitement in the neighborhood. Professor Brennan arrived at 8 a.m. with an unexpected companion, Dr. Amara Okafor, a specialist in Revolutionary War document authentication from Yale University. Sarah, Dr. Okafor flew in from New Haven this morning. She's arguably the world's leading expert on Washington-era correspondence. Dr. Okafor, a woman in her 40s, with an easy smile and precise manner, examined Sarah's setup with approval. Ms. Chen, your preservation instincts have been excellent. Many amateur discoveries suffer damage from well-intentioned but improper handling. At 9:30, a convoy of black SUVs arrived, not the dramatic parade of government vehicles Sarah had imagined, but a modest procession that nonetheless commanded attention. The lead vehicle parked directly in front of her house, while security personnel quickly but efficiently established a perimeter. Dr. Sullivan emerged from the second vehicle with 2 colleagues and what appeared to be portable historical equipment. In her 60s, she moved with the confident authority of someone accustomed to handling significant discoveries. Her team included Dr. Robert Kim, a forensic document analyst, and Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a specialist in colonial-era political correspondence. The neighbors had gathered, subtly as Philadelphia residents do, on stoops and front yards, phones discreetly recording this unprecedented visit to their street. Sarah felt the weight of community attention along with professional scrutiny. Ms. Chen, Dr. Sullivan said warmly, shaking hands with genuine warmth despite the formal circumstances. Thank you for your cooperation. These preliminary reports suggest you found something truly extraordinary. Inside, the professionals quickly transformed Sarah's living room into a high-tech authentication laboratory. Unlike yesterday's equipment, today's devices seemed more sophisticated. Specialized cameras, calibrated lighting, and tablets connected to databases Sarah couldn't have imagined existed. Dr. Kim began explaining their process. We're looking for multiple authentication markers, paper analysis, ink composition, aging patterns, handwriting analysis, and historical content verification. Each element must align perfectly for definitive authentication. As they worked, Dr. Martinez read the letters with growing excitement. These references to Continental Army financing. Ms. Chen, do you understand the historical significance? These letters suggest Washington had European financial backing months before our traditional timeline indicates. Dr. Okafor was particularly focused on one letter. This discussion of securing liberty through careful planning, the phraseology matches Washington's private correspondence style, but the strategic details go beyond anything in his documented papers. Sarah watched the experts work, feeling increasingly proud of her discovery. Her teacher's mind appreciated their methodical approach, the way they built understanding through careful observation and analysis. Dr. Sullivan called out to the room. Everyone, look at this. She held up a letter to the special lighting. There's writing between the lines, what appears to be invisible ink revealing when heated properly. The room fell silent as additional text became visible, names, locations, and strategies that hadn't appeared during Sarah's initial review. Dr. Martinez read aloud, should British forces move south, coordinate with SEA in Carolina, and ensure safe passage for critical supplies through maritime connections. Professor Brennan whistled softly. Sarah, you found a Revolutionary War intelligence network. This isn't just historical correspondence, it's evidence of a sophisticated spy operation. The implications hit Sarah like a wave. Are you saying my house was some kind of Revolutionary War safe house? Dr. Sullivan nodded thoughtfully. The Hartwell family involvement seems more significant than initially thought. These weren't just documents stored in your attic. They were deliberately preserved by people who understood their importance. As the experts continued their work, Sarah's doorbell rang repeatedly. Each time brought new challenges. A representative from a private collector offering substantial money for the letters, a documentary filmmaker proposing an exclusive story, and strangely, someone claiming to represent the Society for Accurate Historical Preservation, who insisted certain details should remain private. Dr. Kim looked up from his analysis equipment. I'm getting some unusual readings. This paper has characteristics I've never seen in American colonial documents. The composition suggests European manufacture, but with modifications that suggest American adaptation. Dr. Okafor expanded on this finding. Revolutionary correspondents often used European paper for important communications, but these modifications could indicate a paper source specifically prepared for secret communications. The morning progressed with mounting excitement as authentication confirmed the letter's age and revealed new details. But Sarah noticed tension developing among the experts. Sideways glances, lowered voices during certain discussions, and what seemed like careful editing of their findings for the record. Dr. Sullivan finally addressed this directly. Ms. Chen, full disclosure. Some of these letters contain information that certain institutions might prefer remained private. Nothing harmful, but potentially embarrassing to established historical narratives. Sarah felt a moment of clarity. You're saying that powerful people might not want these letters made public? Not exactly, Dr. Martinez clarified, but historical revision always creates resistance from institutions invested in particular interpretations of the past. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor that changed everything. A woman in her 80s, impeccably dressed and walking with a cane, appeared at Sarah's door, flanked by a younger man in an expensive suit. Ms. Chen, I'm Eleanor Hartwell Thompson. My grandfather was Charles Hartwell, who sold this house to the Rodriguez family in 1954. Sarah's excitement was immediate. The descendant of the original family. Do you know about these letters? Eleanor's eyes sparkled with intelligence and something like relief. My dear, I've been waiting for 70 years for someone to find those documents. My grandfather didn't abandon them. He left them for the right moment, for the right person. The room buzzed as experts realized they had access to family knowledge. About the letters, Eleanor continued, Charles Hartwell was the great-grandson of Samuel Hartwell, who served as a courier in Washington's intelligence network. Samuel saved those letters because he understood they revealed the true sophistication of Revolutionary War strategy. Dr. Sullivan leaned forward intently. Mrs. Hartwell Thompson, what can you tell us about Samuel's role? Samuel wasn't just a courier, Eleanor explained. He was part of a network that included code makers, international negotiators, and strategic planners. The letters prove that the revolution was won through intelligence and preparation, not just battlefield heroics. The elderly woman reached into her purse and produced a small leather journal. This was Samuel's record book. It provides context for every letter in that attic. Dr. Okafor's hands trembled as she examined the journal. This is extraordinary. Contemporary notes explaining Revolutionary War intelligence operations. The historical value is immeasurable. Eleanor smiled at Sarah. My dear, you haven't just found old letters. You've uncovered evidence of how a colonial intelligence network helped birth American independence. As the afternoon progressed, the combined evidence from the letters and Samuel's journal painted a remarkable picture. Revolutionary War leaders had been far more organized than standard histories suggested. European allies had been involved much earlier than traditionally believed. Financial arrangements had been more sophisticated than textbooks indicated. Dr. Kim completed his analysis. Everything confirms mid to late 18th century origins. But more importantly, the content correlates perfectly with this journal. We're looking at a documented intelligence operation that shaped American independence. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of her discovery. What does this mean for the historical record? Dr. Sullivan considered carefully. It means we'll need to revise several chapters of Revolutionary War history. These documents reveal strategies, connections, and preparations that challenge simplified narratives about American independence. Eleanor patted Sarah's hand gently. Charles always said these papers would surface when America needed reminding. That freedom requires both courage and careful planning. Perhaps that time is now. The late afternoon brought a conference call with the National Archives, the Smithsonian, and the Museum of the American Revolution. All three institutions wanted access to the documents, proposing various preservation and display arrangements. Sarah listened to prestigious institutions compete for her discovery, still somewhat stunned by how her life had transformed. Yesterday, she'd been a struggling teacher facing foreclosure. Today, major museums were offering preservation contracts that would ensure her financial security. Dr. Martinez addressed this directly. Ms. Chen, these institutions aren't just offering money, they're offering to preserve your discovery for future generations while ensuring you receive appropriate recognition and compensation. Professor Brennan added supportively, Sarah, you have leverage here. These letters are historically significant enough that institutions will negotiate to meet your terms. As discussions continued, Sarah realized she wanted more than financial security. She wanted her students, particularly those in her summer school program, to understand how ordinary people like the Hartwells had shaped American history. I have a proposal, Sarah announced. Whatever institution gets these letters must commit to educational programs for Philadelphia public schools. These documents belong to this city, and this city's children should benefit from their discovery. Dr. Sullivan smiled approvingly. That's exactly the kind of thinking that makes for responsible historical preservation. Evening brought quieter conversations as equipment was packed and next steps planned. The White House team would return with additional specialists tomorrow. The letters would remain with Sarah overnight, with security ensuring their protection. Eleanor prepared to leave, offering final insights. Sarah, you've given my family's preserving efforts meaning. Samuel would be proud that his careful documentation has finally found someone worthy of protecting it. As the elderly woman walked carefully to her car, leaning on her cane but moving with remarkable dignity, Sarah felt connected to something larger than herself. The teacher who cleaned her attic had become a bridge between past and present, between the intelligence networks that created American independence and the educational systems that preserved its memory. Mrs. Kowalski appeared. As the official visitors departed, Sarah, I've lived on this street for 84 years. Today was the most exciting day I've ever seen here. That evening, Sarah walked through her house with new appreciation. The weathered floorboards had supported Revolutionary War couriers. The walls had listened to conversations about American independence. The attic had protected documents that revealed the true complexity of creating a nation. Her phone buzzed with messages from relatives, friends, and colleagues who'd seen news reports. The struggling teacher had become a local celebrity, her name associated with one of the most significant Revolutionary War discoveries in recent memory. As she prepared for bed, Sarah looked at the carefully secured letters one more time. Tomorrow would bring more experts, more decisions, and more connection to networks of historical preservation. But tonight, she felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd found exactly what she didn't know she was looking for. The elementary school teacher who'd discovered the true sophistication of America's founding now faced the responsibility of ensuring that discovery benefited future generations. In her modest rowhouse, surrounded by genuine Revolutionary War intelligence documents, Sarah Chen had become an unexpected guardian of American history, and she was ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. The morning of day 3 brought an extraordinary sight to Fishtown. Sarah awakened to find her street transformed into what looked like a historical command center. News crews from major networks had established positions at both ends of the block, while officials from the Smithsonian, National Archives, and the President's Historical Preservation Commission had set up equipment for what they called final authentication and preservation planning. Sarah, dressed in her best teacher outfit, a navy blazer and professional slacks, recognizing that today's decisions would shape not just her future, but potentially how future generations understood American independence. The weight of responsibility felt both daunting and energizing. Mrs. Kowalski met her at the mailbox, eyes bright with excitement. "Sarah, dear, the mayor's office called my house this morning. They want to invite you to speak at Independence Hall next month about your discovery." The significance hit Sarah immediately. Speaking at the birthplace of American democracy about Revolutionary War intelligence networks seemed like something from a dream, not the reality of a struggling elementary school teacher. Dr. Sullivan arrived at 9 a.m. with an expanded team that included Dr. David Chen, no relation, a cryptographer specializing in Revolutionary War codes, and Dr. Maria Santos, a financial historian who studied early American economic networks. They came equipped with portable X-ray machines, sophisticated chemical analysis equipment, and tablets connected to databases containing every known Revolutionary War document in America. "Ms. Chen," Dr. Sullivan announced, "we've made breakthrough discoveries overnight. Initial analysis of the images we took yesterday revealed additional hidden content throughout the letter collection. Your documents aren't just historically significant, they're an intact intelligence archive." Eleanor Hartwell Thompson returned, accompanied this time by her grandson Thomas, a MIT computer science professor who specialized in historical document digitization. "Sarah, I brought Tom because Samuel's journal contains references to mathematical codes embedded in the letters. We believe Revolutionary War spies created encryption methods more sophisticated than previously imagined." As the teams worked, a remarkable picture emerged. The letters weren't randomly preserved documents. They formed a complete intelligence dossier chronicling how George Washington's spy network operated, financed, and communicated with foreign allies. Each letter contained multiple layers of information, obvious content for casual readers, coded messages for trained operatives, and mathematical patterns that revealed operational schedules. Dr. Chen demonstrated the cryptographic analysis. "This letter appears to discuss personal matters between friends, but when you apply Samuel Hartwell's documented cipher key, it reveals British troop movements and supply routes through Philadelphia." Professor Brennan, who'd returned with Dr. Okafor and 2 colleagues from the American Historical Association, was documenting everything with scholarly precision. "Sarah, we're witnessing the recovery of an entire intelligence operation. This goes beyond individual letters. It's a window into how Revolution-era spies actually worked." Dr. Santos made an equally significant discovery. These financial references aren't just mentions of money. They're documentation of a sophisticated international banking network that funded the Continental Army. The French assistance began much earlier and was far more complex than we've taught in schools. As the morning progressed, Sarah fielded continuous calls from institutions worldwide. The British Museum wanted to examine potential British intelligence referenced in the letters. The French National Archives offered collaboration on documents, mentioning French agents. Universities from Harvard to Oxford requested access for specific research projects. But the most surprising call came from Dr. Benjamin Franklin Adams, a descendant of Benjamin Franklin, who served as a consultant to several museum systems. His voice carried genuine excitement. "Ms. Chen, my ancestor, would have admired your discovery. These letters reveal that revolutionary intelligence operations influenced his diplomatic work in ways we've never understood." Around noon, a development occurred that none had anticipated. A man in his 70s, wearing a well-tailored suit and carrying an antique leather briefcase, approached through the gathered crowd. He introduced himself to the security personnel, who immediately contacted Dr. Sullivan. "I'm Admiral James Morrison, retired, former Director of Navy Historical Preservation. I represent a consortium of descendants from Revolutionary War families. We've been waiting for documents like these to surface for 2 centuries. Dr. Sullivan invited Admiral Morrison inside, where he opened his briefcase to reveal photocopies of similar letters and a detailed family genealogy. "Miss Chen, your discovery connects to a network of preserved documents held by multiple families. We've been documenting Washington's intelligence operations for generations, waiting for missing pieces like these." Sarah felt the room energy shift as Admiral Morrison explained that several prominent American families had preserved Revolutionary War intelligence documents, but none had the complete picture. Her letters filled crucial gaps, revealing connections between regional spy networks, foreign allies, and strategic planning. "The implications are staggering," Dr. Okafor observed. "We're not just revising Revolutionary War history, we're discovering that our understanding was fundamentally incomplete." Thomas Hartwell Thompson had connected his laptop to specialized equipment, running pattern analysis on the mathematical codes. Aunt Eleanor was right about the sophistication. These codes use early mathematical concepts that wouldn't be formalized for another 50 years. Samuel Hartwell was essentially a colonial computer scientist. The afternoon brought unexpected drama when Julia Winters, a representative from a private collection consortium, arrived with a remarkable offer. "Ms. Chen, my clients represent several major private collectors who prefer anonymity. They're prepared to offer $25 million for the entire collection, with guarantees of preservation and limited scholarly access." The room fell, silent. Sarah felt the weight of $25 million, enough to solve not just her financial problems, but to transform her entire life. Yet something about the offer felt wrong. The emphasis on limited access and the collector's desired anonymity. Dr. Sullivan stepped forward diplomatically. "Ms. Winters, while we appreciate substantial preservation offers, these documents have national historical significance that transcends private ownership." Admiral Morrison was more direct. "These letters belong in public institutions where scholars can access them freely. Private collections, however well-intentioned, can result in important historical evidence remaining hidden." Eleanor Hartwell Thompson placed a gentle hand on Sarah's arm. "Dear, Samuel preserved these letters for the American people, not for the highest bidder. The choice is yours, but remember that some things matter more than money." The tension in the room reflected competing visions of historical preservation. Sarah felt the weight of decision. Financial security versus historical transparency, knowing that her choice would set a precedent for how major discoveries were handled. "I need to think about this," Sarah said finally. "And I want to hear all my options before deciding." Dr. Sullivan nodded approvingly. "That's wise. The National Archives has prepared a comprehensive offer that addresses both preservation and education. Would you like to review it?" The National Archives proposal was impressive. Full authentication and preservation, with Sarah retaining honorary ownership while ensuring public access. They offered financial compensation, educational program support for Philadelphia schools, and recognition of Sarah as a major historical preservator. Additionally, Dr. Sullivan explained, the President has expressed interest in personally thanking you for your discovery. These letters have provided insights into early American intelligence operations that inform current national security understanding. Sarah felt overwhelmed but oddly energized. The teacher who'd cleaned her attic had become someone worthy of presidential recognition. More importantly, her discovery was bridging past and present in ways that honored both the Revolutionary War, operatives who preserved these secrets, and contemporary Americans who deserved to understand their true heritage. As evening approached, a news conference was arranged on Sarah's front porch. Major networks, newspapers, and historical societies sent representatives. Sarah stood before microphones, looking out at neighbors who'd gathered throughout the block, feeling simultaneously nervous and proud. "My name is Sarah Chen," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "3 days ago, I was cleaning my attic because I couldn't afford to live here much longer. I found letters that have changed not just my life, but our understanding of how America gained independence," she continued, describing the discovery and the week's authentication process. "I've learned that Revolutionary War heroes weren't just brave soldiers. They were brilliant strategists who created sophisticated intelligence networks. These letters prove that American independence resulted from careful planning, international cooperation, and the courage of people who preserved these secrets for future generations." The crowd grew as Sarah spoke. Neighbors, historians, students from nearby schools, and ordinary citizens drawn by news coverage listened as she explained the significance of documents that had waited patiently in her attic. "I've received offers that would make me wealthy," Sarah continued, "but I've decided to ensure these letters serve the public good. The National Archives will preserve them, with guarantees of access for scholars, students, and anyone curious about how our nation was truly founded." Applause erupted from the gathered crowd. Mrs. Kowalski wiped tears from her eyes. Several neighbors called out words of support. The teacher who'd faced foreclosure had become a community hero by choosing historical preservation over personal profit. Dr. Sullivan stepped to the microphones. "On behalf of the White House and the National Archives, I want to thank Ms. Chen for her partnership in preserving these extraordinary documents. Her decision ensures that all Americans will benefit from this discovery." Admiral Morrison added his perspective. "Ms. Chen exemplifies the best of American values: curiosity, integrity, and commitment to the common good. Samuel Hartwell and his fellow Revolutionary War operatives would be proud." As the news conference concluded and equipment was packed away, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. The letters would be preserved for future generations. Her financial problems were solved through the archive's compensation package. Most importantly, her students would learn that ordinary people, like attic-cleaning teachers and letter-preserving patriots, could make extraordinary contributions to history. Eleanor Hartwell Thompson approached for a final goodbye. "Sarah, you've honored my family's 2-century commitment to preserving these documents. Samuel would be delighted to know they've found such a worthy guardian." The evening brought quiet, reflection. Sarah walked through her house, the house she would now keep, with new appreciation for the layers of history contained within its walls. Revolutionary War spies had walked these floors. Intelligence documents had waited patiently in the attic, and now an elementary school teacher had bridged past and present in ways that enhanced understanding for everyone. The phone rang one last time that day. This call came from the principal of Sarah's school. Sarah, the school board wants to create a special program about your discovery. We're thinking about a Revolutionary War intelligence curriculum that teaches students how historical evidence works. Sarah smiled, recognizing the perfect culmination of her unexpected journey. I'd love to develop that program. These letters show that history isn't just about famous people, it's about ordinary folks who made careful choices that shaped the future. As she prepared for bed, Sarah looked once more at photographs of the letters that had transformed her life. Tomorrow, specialists would begin the painstaking process of preserving the originals for permanent display. The Hartwell family's careful stewardship would be honored through public exhibition. The struggling teacher who discovered revolutionary war intelligence documents had been transformed into Sarah Chen, historical preservator and educational advocate. Her attic cleaning project had revealed not just letters, but a legacy that connected Philadelphia neighborhoods to the founding of America. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the National Archives' newest exhibition hall, watching students from her school examine the preserved letters. The display included Samuel Hartwell's journal, contemporary explanations of the intelligence operations, and an interactive section showing how Revolutionary War spies created and decoded messages. "Ms. Chen," one of her former students asked, "did you know these letters were important when you found them?" Sarah smiled, remembering her initial uncertainty and excitement. "I knew they were old and interesting, but I had no idea they would teach us so much about how brave, smart people helped create our country." The teacher who'd faced foreclosure stood in a room that celebrated her discovery, surrounded by students learning that history lived all around them, in attics, family stories, and careful preservation efforts spanning centuries. Sarah Chen had cleaned an attic and found American history. More importantly, she'd ensured that history would inspire future generations to appreciate the ordinary heroes who shaped extraordinary moments. The letters that waited patiently for the right person had found their guardian. The teacher who needed them had preserved them, and the nation that benefited from their revelation had a new story to tell about how intelligence, courage, and careful planning created the foundation of American independence. In the end, Sarah Chen's attic cleaning project had become a lesson in how present-day curiosity could unlock past wisdom, benefiting future understanding. The Revolutionary War intelligence operations had finally been revealed, 2 centuries after brave operatives like Samuel Hartwell had documented, coded, and preserved them for exactly this moment. The simple woman who discovered historical letters in her attic had become part of history herself, a reminder that extraordinary moments often begin with ordinary actions, guided by curiosity, integrity, and commitment to sharing knowledge with others. 2 years later, Sarah Chen stood at the podium of the International Historical Preservation Conference in Washington, D.C., her voice carrying across a packed auditorium of scholars, educators, and government officials. The title of her keynote address appeared on the massive screen behind her: Hidden Histories, Ordinary Heroes, How Community Discovery Transforms National Understanding. When I tell people I found Revolutionary War spy letters while cleaning my attic, they often laugh, Sarah began, her confidence evident in every gesture. They shouldn't, because those letters taught us that history isn't just written by famous generals and presidents. It's preserved by ordinary families who understand that truth matters more than convenience. The audience included representatives from 37 countries, all eager to hear about the Fishtown Protocol, the international standard for handling historical discoveries that had emerged from Sarah's experience. What had begun as a personal crisis in a Philadelphia rowhouse had become a new paradigm for balancing individual rights, scholarly research, and public access to historical materials. Dr. Elena Martinez, now Director of Community Historical Outreach at the Smithsonian, introduced each segment of Sarah's presentation. Their partnership had flourished into a revolutionary approach to historical education, demonstrating how major discoveries could strengthen communities rather than simply extracting artifacts from them. The Samuel Hartwell Elementary Historical Detective Program, Sarah explained, clicking to a slide showing students examining documents with magnifying glasses, now operates in 47 states. Students learn that history exists everywhere, in family papers, local buildings, even in the stories their grandparents tell. We've verified historical materials in farmhouse barns, city apartment basements, and suburban garage sales. The program had transformed Sarah's financial situation beyond anything she'd imagined possible. The National Archives compensation had paid off her mortgage immediately, but the educational programs, speaking engagements, and consulting work had provided sustained prosperity. More importantly, they'd connected her to a global network of educators, revolutionizing how history was taught and preserved. Among the audience sat remarkable individuals. Professor Li Wei from Beijing, whose students had discovered Ming Dynasty scrolls using techniques inspired by Sarah's experience. Dr. Fatima Al-Rashid from Cairo, who'd helped establish protocols for community-centered archaeological preservation, and Dr. Ian Mackenzie from Edinburgh, whose work with Scottish clan archives had benefited from the Fishtown model. Sarah's presentation included video testimonials from locations worldwide: a farmer in Kansas who'd found Civil War military communications in his barn ceiling, a librarian in Vermont who'd uncovered lost Jonathan Edwards sermons in donated books, and a family in Georgia whose plantation papers had revealed previously unknown networks of underground railroad operations. Each discovery follows similar patterns, Sarah explained. Ordinary people find extraordinary materials. Institutions rush to claim them. Communities worry about losing their heritage. The Hartwell-Chen Protocol creates frameworks where everyone benefits. Discoverers receive fair compensation, scholars gain access for research, and communities maintain connection to their historical materials. The morning's highlight was Eleanor Hartwell Thompson's presentation, delivered via video link from her family home. Now in her 80s, Eleanor moved more slowly, but spoke with the same sharp intelligence that had enhanced Sarah's discovery. Sarah Chen honored my great-great-grandfather's faith in American institutions, Eleanor said. Samuel preserved those intelligence documents because he believed future Americans would need to understand how their independence was truly won. Sarah ensured that belief was justified. The presentation continued with current developments that positioned Sarah's discovery at the center of ongoing historical research. The Philadelphia Intelligence Archive, established in Sarah's renovated rowhouse, had become a pilgrimage site for scholars studying Revolutionary War espionage. The building itself was now listed on the National Register of Historic Places, ensuring its preservation while allowing it to remain Sarah's family home. Dr. Benjamin Franklin Adams, who'd maintained close collaboration with the project, presented findings that connected Sarah's letters to previously mysterious aspects of Franklin's diplomatic work. These documents proved that revolutionary intelligence operations influenced European diplomacy far more than we'd understood. Sarah's discovery literally forced us to rewrite chapters about the revolution's international dimensions. The afternoon sessions focused on practical applications. Sarah demonstrated the digital archive system that made the Hartwell letters accessible to researchers worldwide while protecting the physical documents. Interactive displays allowed conference attendees to experience the authentication process, understanding how multiple forms of evidence combine to verify historical materials. Technology serves preservation, not the reverse, Sarah emphasized. These digital tools ensure that physically fragile documents can be studied without risking damage. We've created virtual research experiences that allow students from rural schools to examine Revolutionary War spy letters with the same detail available to Harvard professors. The conference's most moving moment came when Thomas Jefferson Brown, a descendant of Revolutionary War participants, presented a collection of family letters that complemented Sarah's discovery. Ms. Chen's experience showed us that preservation requires courage. Her example inspired our family to finally share documents we'd protected privately for generations. Sarah felt overwhelmed watching this man, whose ancestors had fought alongside Samuel Hartwell, offering materials that would enhance understanding of revolutionary intelligence networks. The ripple effects of her decision continued expanding, encouraging others to contribute to collective historical knowledge. Dr. Catherine Winters, from the History Channel, who'd become a close friend and collaborator, presented the media component of preservation strategy. Sarah's approach balanced transparency with responsible storytelling. The documentaries we've produced focus on historical significance while respecting the communities where these discoveries occur. The documentaries, America's Hidden Spies, Letters from the Revolution, and Teaching History Through Discovery, had reached millions of viewers worldwide. They demonstrated how historical discoveries could inspire contemporary audiences while maintaining scholarly rigor. During the evening banquet, Sarah received the International Historical Preservation Award from the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. The recognition acknowledged how her discovery and preservation choices had influenced international protocols for handling significant historical materials. Sarah Chen exemplifies how individual citizens can impact global understanding, the UNESCO director stated. Her commitment to public access over private profit has created standards that protect cultural heritage while encouraging discovery. The award ceremony included testimonials from students whose lives had been changed by the educational programs inspired by Sarah's experience. Marcus Johnson, a high school student from Philadelphia, spoke about discovering Civil War letters in his grandmother's house and properly preserving them using techniques learned through the Hartwell Elementary program. Ms. Chen taught us that finding history isn't enough, Marcus explained. You have to make sure it serves everyone, not just yourself. That's what real American values look like. Dr. David Kim, who'd originally analyzed the letter's encryption, presented new research showing how Revolutionary War spies had influenced modern intelligence techniques. The mathematical codes documented by Samuel Hartwell anticipate conceptual breakthroughs that wouldn't be formalized for another century. Sarah's preservation of these documents has informed current cybersecurity research. As the evening continued, international colleagues shared how the Fishtown Protocol had influenced their own country's approaches to historical preservation. Dr. Marie Dupuy from the French National Archives described new processes for community involvement in archival decisions. Professor Hiroshi Tanaka from Tokyo explained how neighborhood historical societies were being empowered to participate in major archaeological decisions. Sarah felt particular pride when Dr. Margaret Sullivan announced the White House's new Historical Discovery Advisory Board, which would include citizen preservators alongside traditional scholars. Sarah's example demonstrated that ordinary Americans often make the wisest choices about protecting our shared heritage. The conference concluded with Sarah's challenge to attendees: historical preservation succeeds when it builds bridges, not walls. Every family photo, every saved letter, every preserved object represents someone's choice to connect past, present, and future. Our job as educators, scholars, and citizens is to honor those choices while ensuring the benefits reach the widest possible audience. Following the conference, Sarah returned to Philadelphia with renewed energy for expanding the programs that had emerged from her discovery. The Fishtown neighborhood had been transformed by its connection to Revolutionary War history. Property values had increased, small businesses thrived on historical tourism, and the community took enhanced pride in its heritage. Mrs. Kowalski, now in her 90s but still sharp and observant, had become an unofficial neighborhood historian. Sarah's discovery reminded us that every block has stories worth telling, she explained to visiting scholars. This street has seen generations of immigrants, workers, families building lives. The revolution letters just proved that important things happen in ordinary places. The financial transformation of Sarah's life continued beyond the initial National Archives compensation. Book royalties from Letters from Samuel Revolutionary War Intelligence in America provided steady income. Speaking fees and consulting. Work with museums and educational institutions offered both financial security and professional satisfaction. More importantly, Sarah had found her calling as a bridge between academic historical research and community education. The modest elementary school teacher had evolved into a nationally recognized expert on historical preservation, while never losing her connection to classroom teaching and community involvement. The Samuel Hartwell Community Center, established in a renovated building adjacent to Sarah's house, served multiple functions. Elementary school students participated in weekly historical detective programs. Adult education classes helped community members document family histories. Graduate students from universities worldwide conducted research using the specialized archives. We've proven that significant historical discoveries can strengthen communities rather than depleting them, Sarah explained to a delegation of Japanese educators visiting Philadelphia. Preservation works best when it serves the people connected to the preserved materials. Dr. James Wright, who'd been present during the initial authentication, had tracked the academic impact of Sarah's discovery. These letters have generated over 200 scholarly articles, 3 graduate programs in Revolutionary War studies, and fundamental revisions to standard textbooks. But they've also inspired community history programs across America. The personal dimension of Sarah's transformation remained equally significant. The teacher who'd faced foreclosure alone had discovered that meaningful work could provide both financial stability and personal fulfillment. Her marriage to Dr. Robert Kim, the forensic document analyst who'd helped authenticate the letters, represented the best kind of partnership. 2 people passionate about preserving and understanding the past for future generations. Their home, the same Fishtown rowhouse where everything began, now balanced private family life with public historical mission. The attic where Sarah had found the letters was preserved exactly as it was during the discovery, allowing visitors to experience the moment that had launched a new era in community historical preservation. 5 years after her initial discovery, Sarah stood in her old classroom at the school, now visiting as a guest speaker rather than the resident teacher. The walls displayed student projects about local historical discoveries, each representing families empowered to preserve and share their heritage. Every family has history worth preserving, she told the assembled third graders. Sometimes it's in letters hidden in attics, sometimes it's in stories passed down through generations. Your job is to stay curious, ask questions, and remember that protecting history makes it available for everyone. One student raised her hand. Ms. Chen, how did you know the letters were important? Sarah smiled, remembering similar questions from countless audiences. I didn't know immediately, but I knew they were old, carefully preserved, and different from anything I'd seen before. Most importantly, I knew that keeping them secret would help no one, while sharing them properly could help everyone. As she left the school that afternoon, Sarah reflected on how completely her life had changed. The struggling teacher, afraid of losing her home, had become an internationally recognized advocate for community-centered historical preservation. The person who'd cleaned her attic from necessity had started a movement that honored ordinary people's role in preserving extraordinary documents. The letters Samuel Hartwell had saved, the decisions Eleanor Hartwell Thompson's family had made to preserve them, and Sarah's choice to share them publicly had created something unprecedented, a model where historical discovery strengthened communities while advancing scholarly understanding. The simple woman who'd found historical documents in her attic had proven that the most significant discoveries often begin with ordinary actions guided by integrity, curiosity, and commitment to serving others. The Revolutionary War intelligence letters had finally completed their journey from secret operations to public knowledge, inspiring new generations to appreciate that history lives everywhere, waiting for people brave enough to discover, preserve, and share it. In the end, Sarah Chen's story demonstrated that extraordinary transformations could emerge from unexpected beginnings. The teacher who cleaned her attic had cleaned a path between past and present, ensuring that the careful work of Revolutionary War spies would inspire 21st century Americans to understand their heritage more completely. The hidden history had been revealed, the community hero recognized, and the future enriched by lessons from the past. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.